So I've been asked to show how I drive this, particularly the automatic transmission, because sometimes it seems like you need a PhD to know how to use a simple 90s Toyota automatic. And you can do damage on these because if you run with the overdrive on in unideal conditions, you can overheat the gearbox. So I'm going to do my best. I'm actually holding my action cam while trying to drive, which is safe because I'm used to driving with one hand. Trust me, I've been doing it my whole life, and trust me, I'm a professional. I used to drive big trucks as well, when you're constantly shifting and turning with one hand. So I'm just coming back from the automotive shop, and I thought I'd show you how I drive this. So it's up to running temperature. The overdrive is off, if you can tell by the light. And I do apologize again if this is shaky or there might be parts that go out of scene or out of focus, purely because I am concentrating 100% on the road, especially in little intersections like this one. So that's second gear, that's third gear. Now at 58 kilometers an hour, you'll see the rev counter drop and it'll go into torque converter lockup. So approaching it now, there we go, and it suddenly starts picking up speed rapidly. Now I'm just barely touching the accelerator and I get engine braking. So by touching the accelerator just ever so slightly, coming down from anywhere from once the torque converter is locked up, will give you engine braking. So it's really good for going down like little slopes and little hills. It really lets you modulate the speed without having to touch the brakes at all. So that's third gear. And we're about to go into torque converter lockup, which it's already done. And now if I just accelerate a bit and then feather off the throttle, you have to keep touching the throttle. So I'm just slightly off it and you can see it engine braking. And it will lock up the torque converter in third gear at about 58 kilometers an hour, but it'll let you come all the way down to, see that, near 50 kilometers an hour, and I'm still locked up in the torque converter. So this is what I use for like anything up to 60, 65 kilometers an hour. Overdrive off, you actually have 4 speeds because you have gears 1, 2, 3, and then third locked up. So it's actually a 4-speed right now. And then if I have to do 80 kilometers an hour, say there's a section of 80, I'll put the overdrive on because I don't want the engine revving that high. And at 82 kilometers an hour, rather annoyingly, the torque converter locks up in fourth. So if the speed limit is 80 and there are cars doing 79, 78, and then maybe 82, 83, you're constantly going to be going from fourth gear to fourth gear locked up to fourth gear unlocked, because when the torque converter locks up in fourth, it's not as forgiving as it is in third, so it won't let you drop down the speed so much. It'll only lock up at 82. The minute you go below that, it'll unlock. So anything from 65 to 100 plus, anything above 65 basically, or 70 kilometers an hour, I'll put the overdrive on. The only time you don't want to be using overdrive is for slow stuff like this, stop start, where you're putting a lot of load on the car, on the gearbox, accelerating up to speed, because the overdrive can wear out and it can overheat doing that. The other question that I also get with people is, I'm actually going to talk just a little bit and then I'll shut up and you can just hear the engine and see how it drives on the way back. We will get on the motorway soon. But the other thing is, when you're climbing hills on these, this is why I feel like you need like a PhD to drive these things. If you're going up a really steep hill on a hot day and your engine temperature starts to climb just a little bit, and say you're doing about 100 kilometers an hour at the bottom of the hill. Once you start climbing it, you put your foot down more and more and more. You're at about 90, then say you drop to about 86, and your foot's pretty well not buried. You never have to bury it on these engines. You hear the engine braking, and you'll hear it unlock. There we go, unlock. You never have to bury it with these, but the temperature will start to rise, and you can go down to like 82 with the torque converter still locked. But the thing is, once the torque converter locks, it makes the engine work hard. There is no give anymore. There's no sort of slip where the automatic transmission, the torque converter can slip and take up some of that heat, some of that strain, let the engine give it a break. Basically, the engine does not get a break. It's just being whipped hard. And once that gauge starts to rise, you've got a few options then. You can really back off below 82 kilometers an hour until the torque converter unlocks, and then the transmission, the torque converter will start slipping, and it'll start taking away a lot of that heat, and the engine won't have to work so hard. It's not going to be forced to spin the wheels one-to-one anymore. Because once the torque converter locks up, that's all it does. It locks the engine with the actual axle. So the engine has to turn the wheels directly, basically. There's no sort of slipping fan in the middle like the torque converter. It's not letting it have a break. So if you are sort of getting hot going up a hill, you can drop below 82 and let the torque converter unlock. But then you run the risk of overheating the automatic transmission. And so what you can do is you'll find yourself playing a game between should I cook the gearbox or should I cook the engine? But if you're really good, if you're really in tune with it after a while, and I've only had this for like 6 months now, and I've never had to do it on it, but I know that I can. And you know, once you get used to it, you know that you've got those two areas to dissipate heat. You can put load on the engine and climb the hill up really fast. Once it starts getting a bit warm, you can drop back and unlock the torque converter and take some of that heat out, but then you're also heating up the automatic transmission doing so. And you can go back and forth and basically just split the load. The other way you can go up the hill is to drop back, take overdrive off, and really slow down. So you like slow down to like 70. So you'll be in third. The engine will be revving much higher. It'll be revving closer to like 2.9, 3,000. And it won't be working that much harder because it's kind of like sprinting on its tippy toes then. There's not much resistance left in third gear with the torque converter locked up, and it should dance up the hill at about 70 kilometers an hour in third gear locked up. So yeah, I've tried to make this video before, and it's just so hard to explain. And I'm just hoping that, you know, I'll just do it this time, and whatever I say, hopefully it makes sense. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. You're just gonna have to play around with your own car. But I'm gonna be quiet now, and you can just watch the gauge and the road. And we will get on the motorway soon, but it's only 80 kilometers an hour all the way through the tunnel back home. So you'll see it accelerate in overdrive, and maybe lock up the torque converter in fourth for a little bit and then not. But what you also don't want to do when you're getting on like an on-ramp like this is leave it in third gear with the torque converter locked up, get to like 80 kilometers an hour, think, oh, I'll push overdrive on, and it'll jump into fourth gear overdrive. It won't. It shocks the transmission. These aren't very intelligent cars. These are old school technology. They're bulletproof, reliable, but they're old school. So if you were to get to 80 kilometers an hour and then hit that button there, what it's going to do is immediately take it out of torque converter lockup. So you're going to go into third gear. The engine's going to scream. Then immediately it's going to think, oh crap, I'm doing 80 kilometers an hour, 90 kilometers an hour. I need to go into overdrive. And then it'll put it into overdrive. And then immediately the next thing the computer does is like, oh crap, I'm doing well above 80. I need to lock the torque converter. So it goes back a gear, then it goes up, then it locks up. It really like shocks the system. It can't be good for it. So I normally accelerate to like 60, 65 kilometers an hour, and then I push the overdrive button, and that takes the load off the overdrive as well, because it's not trying to build you up to speed from zero. It's basically like trying to start off in fifth gear. So this is the on-ramp. It's really slow. Plus I got this Hilux in front of me with a fridge on the back or something. What is that? It's not a fridge. It's too short to be a fridge. Maybe a top-loader washing machine? I don't know. See how exciting my life is? And we boost. Overdrive on. See that little surge? And fourth gear lockup. And now I back off because I'm speeding and there is speeding cameras everywhere. The other thing I wanted to mention in my 6-month update video, which I didn't mention on this, was the engine power. I can't remember if I did mention it or not. This thing has so much torque and so much power. So right now, I am using about 4% throttle, maybe 5%, and it's unlocked at the moment. Once it's locked up, you only need like 3% throttle to keep it at 80, and maybe 4% throttle to keep it at 100 kilometers an hour. And I only realized how much power it has on reserve was when we were going for like a pretty long drive, and it was sitting at about 100, 105, 110. And after like, a long drive, you got to adjust yourself in the seat every now and then. And so when I would not stand up, but like kind of push my legs out, I'd obviously try not to, but I would just ever so slightly blip the accelerator. And because it's locked up, that the engine will surge like instantly. It's got instant response, and you feel that instantly at the wheel, so it'll throw you back just a little bit. And you realize like, wow, I just blipped it maybe 10% and it threw me back into the seat. And I used maybe 5% throttle just to sit at 110 kilometers an hour. So you realize then like this thing has a lot of power and a lot of torque on reserve. It just makes for like a really good driving experience. A lot of people ask me like, what's the difference between like a Delica and a Hiace? I get that quite a bit. Or like a Nissan Homie and a Hiace. The Homie and the Hiace are more alike than the Delica is. The Delica is kind of its own thing. Because the Delica is based on the Pajero platform, it is essentially just a Pajero with a van body on it. And while I've never had a Delica, I have had quite a few Pajeros. One with the 4M40T, the 2.8 turbo diesel engine, and then another Pajero with a 4056T, the 2.5. And compared to this, it's like comparing like an avocado to my car. The 4056 was remarkably gutless, even with its turbo. Like, you really had to be on boost with that thing. You had to really be kicking it in the balls to get it to ever show you that it has a turbo strapped to the side. And you feel bad because you're constantly like flogging the shit out of it, especially in soft sand. But then in saying that, if you are into like sort of hardcore fall driving, like, soft sand, deep ruts, that sort of stuff, then the Delica is definitely the van for you. Like I mentioned before in my videos, like I'm kind of over that stuff. I've done it all. I've been all over the country. I've had like the big lifted 80 series turbo diesel. I've had like the 105 series Land Cruiser, and then the Pajeros and stuff. I've done it all, and like sometimes I miss it, but I don't want to have a car like that for this environment, day-to-day driving. I wanted something that doesn't rattle, and I'll be quiet. Can you hear any rattles? No, it's dead silent. And it cruises along, it boosts really well, it's got more power than it needs, and like rather rarely for its generation is it adequately powered, because usually everything out of the 90s was underpowered. And so this is really adequately powered. And like you want to like overtake or something, like I've got like 8% throttle down there, and then I'm back to like 2% now. Like you barely have to touch the gas in this thing to get it to motivate it to move. And it's just a nice car to drive around town. So that's the difference between the Delica and this. With the Delica, you'll have much less power, much less torque, It's also less refined, so it's more of like a clunky diesel. This is sort of like the middle diesel, and then you got the common rail diesel now. So this was like the middle of the breed. Um, so it's clunkier, it's much slower, it's much less refined. Things like if you get the L300 Star Wagon, the door cards are like way different. So they're not like as plush as this. They don't really have storage down there and whatnot. So it's a much more basic, a much more Spartan van. Whereas a Hiace is really just like a comfort cruiser. This is designed for like going up to the Alps, to like the snow, for dirt gravel roads, a few like basic river crossings. Basically Thailand, rural Thailand, Indonesia, like Burma, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, Africa, all of those places, Egypt. If you can picture that, that's what this car was built for, and what it's capable of, I should say, not for. The Japanese built it as just a nice family car, but they also built the Land Cruiser as that and whatnot in the 80 series. I mean, they didn't plan on it being this all-conquering, world-dominating legend then. They knew it was becoming very popular, but it didn't have the status that it has now, the Land Cruisers. It's just, Toyotas. That's what they do. Whereas Holden would buy a gasket that, they'll say, yeah, well, 80% of the cars that we tested, the gasket lasted 89,000 kilometers on it, or 125,000 kilometers. And, Holden Engineering would say, yeah, no, that's perfect, 89, well, what more do they want, they can replace the gasket then, it's going to be well out of warranty. Whereas I know for a fact, when Toyota builds something, they'll test the gasket to like 220,000 kilometers, or 25 years. They will spend, that might not be exact figures, but they will spend up to like 100% more than other manufacturers on certain materials. So you might not get like the cooled seats, you might not get like the massaging seats like you might get in a Hyundai or whatnot. But what you are getting, which you can't see, is better materials, better casting, better R&D, better milling, better refining, and a better quality bolt to screw everything together, that sort of stuff, all that stuff that you can't really see. Yapping away to you, I forgot to take the overdrive off. But that's the thing with this, if you're just cruising around, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to blow the gearbox up. But, best practice is anything 0 to 65 up to 70 kilometers an hour overdrive off. Sure, in the mornings when it's cold, the engine's not up to running temperature, you won't have torque converter lockup, it'll be revving quite a bit. If you're going downhill and stuff, just throw the overdrive on, until it gets up to operating temperature if the over revving is annoying you. It's not doing it any damage. And then, once it's up to running temperature, overdrive off, like in traffic, sort of city driving all day, every day. Motorway, overdrive on. Simple. It's that easy. Just don't turn the overdrive on during sort of everyday driving, and don't turn it off on the motorway. Cool. I'm back home now, so I will fight with this garage remote. This woman looks awfully terrified seeing this black guy in a van pull up next to her. Oh my god, it's a flash area and it's Negro in a van. She's like started shuffling around for a second there. She's like going back and forth. Alright people, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm just going to make sure that no one walks into my garage, which they aren't. I'll make sure the garage closes. I'm looking in the wing mirror, by the way. And it's closing. Just because one of the office buildings next to us, not the apartments, but the office building, got broken into, the garage. And while our garage is filled with lame cars, there's like a Ford Ute and a Holden Ute, which just bogans like it basically. There's this old Hilux that's leaking coolant. It's not like a JDM model, so it's just one of those stripped out Australian versions. have nothing. It's got the 22 RE, I think, in it. Engine. I just don't want anyone breaking into my car, because the trouble with having something special like this is if they do break the lock or the glass or something, then, like, yeah, I'll get a replacement, but it's just going to be a nightmare waiting for it. Cool. Park, handbrake up, wing mirrors in, that one and that one.